It was a bright and sunny Saturday morning in Maple Grove. This was a little neighborhood where everything seemed calm and quiet. Nothing exciting ever happened here, or at least that's what everyone thought. The houses sat in neat rows with green lawns and pretty flowers. Kids rode bikes down the street and birds chirped in the trees. It was the kind of place where you'd think everyone got along. But oh boy, were things about to change. Let me tell you about Jake Turner. Jake was a friendly guy who lived in a small house with a big backyard. He wasn't loud or fancy. He didn't drive a shiny car or throw big parties. Nope, Jake was simple. What made him happy? Chickens. That's right, chickens. He loved those little feathered friends more than anything. A while back, he built a tiny chicken coop in his backyard. It was just for fun, something to keep him busy. The coop was made of wood, painted red, with a little roof to keep the rain off. Inside lived his 3 hens, Clucky, Pebbles, and Goldie. Those names might sound silly, but to Jake, they were special. Clucky was the bossy one. She had fluffy black feathers and always clucked the loudest. Pebbles was smaller, with speckled gray feathers that looked like little rocks. And Goldie, she was the prettiest, with shiny golden feathers that sparkled in the sun. Every morning, Jake would go outside with a big smile. He'd toss them some corn and watch them peck around happily. "Good girls," he'd say, laughing as they waddled after him. To Jake, those chickens were his pride and joy. They made his days brighter, and he didn't care if anyone thought it was weird. But not everyone in Maple Grove liked Jake's chickens. Across the street lived Karen Miller. Now, Karen wasn't just any neighbor, she was the queen of the Homeowners Association, or HOA for short. The HOA was a group that made rules for the neighborhood. They decided things like how tall your grass could grow or what color your mailbox could be. And Karen, she loved those rules more than anything. She carried a clipboard in one hand, ready to write down anything she didn't like. In her other hand was her rule book, a thick stack of papers full of do this and don't do that. Karen's eyes were sharp and her frown was big. If she looked at you, it felt like a grizzly bear staring you down, scary and mean. Everyone in Maple Grove knew Karen. She was the lady who'd knock on your door if your trash can stayed out too long. She'd measure your grass with a ruler and fine you if it was even a tiny bit too tall. One time, she yelled at a kid for leaving his skateboard on the sidewalk. "That's against Rule 12C, she shouted, waving her clipboard. People tried to stay out of her way because Karen didn't mess around. She wanted everything perfect, and she didn't care who she upset. To Karen, Jake was just the chicken guy. She didn't see him as special or important. To her, he was a nobody who dared to break her precious rules. See, the HOA had a rule that said no farm animals. Karen decided Jake's chickens counted as farm animals, even though they were just pets. She'd stand on her porch, glaring across the street at that little red coop. Her nose would wrinkle up like she smelled something bad. "Those chickens don't belong here," she'd mutter to herself. "This is a nice neighborhood, not a farm." Jake didn't know it yet, but Karen had her eye on him. She'd been watching his coop for weeks, waiting for the right moment to pounce. Every time Clucky clucked or Goldie flapped her wings, Karen's frown got deeper. She didn't like the noise. She didn't like the feathers that sometimes floated over to her yard. Most of all, she didn't like that Jake didn't seem to care about her rules. To her, he was a problem, a big, clucking problem she needed to fix. But here's the thing Karen didn't know. Jake wasn't just some guy with chickens. Nope, he had a secret, a big one. Karen thought she had all the power with her clipboard and her rule book. She thought she could boss Jake around and make him tear down that coop. But she was wrong. Jake wasn't scared of her glares or her threats. He had something up his sleeve that she'd never guess. And that sunny Saturday morning, it wasn't going to stay quiet for long. Picture this, the sun was shining bright, painting the sky a happy blue. A soft breeze rustled the leaves and the smell of fresh grass filled the air. Jake stepped outside in his old jeans and a faded t-shirt. He carried a little bucket of chicken feed, humming a tune as he walked to the coop. "Morning, ladies," he called out. Clucky poked her head out first, clucking like she was saying hello. Pebbles and Goldie waddled behind her, flapping their wings excitedly. Now Jake tossed some corn on the ground and watched them peck at it. He loved how simple it was, just him and his chickens enjoying the day. Across the street, Karen was already awake. She peeked out her window, her eyes narrowing as she saw Jake. "There he goes again," she grumbled. She grabbed her clipboard and flipped through her rule book. "Rule 47B, no farm animals allowed," she read out loud. A sneaky smile spread across her face. She'd been waiting for a chance to use that rule and today felt perfect. She slipped on her flip-flops, straightened her shirt, and marched outside. Her footsteps were loud, slap, 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 echoing down the street. She was on a mission, and Jake was her target. Jake didn't see her coming at first. He was too busy laughing at Pebbles, who was chasing a bug around the yard. The chickens clucked and scratched, happy as can be. It was just another normal morning for Jake, or so he thought. But then he heard it, the sound of Karen's flip-flops getting closer. He looked up and there she was, standing at the edge of his yard. Her arms were crossed, her clipboard clutched tight, and her glare was fiercer than ever. "Turner," she shouted, her voice sharp like a teacher scolding a kid. Jake turned around slowly, still holding his bucket. "Morning, Karen," he said with a little wave. He wasn't mad or scared, just calm. That made Karen even angrier. She pointed at the coop with a shaky finger. "Those chickens are against the rules," she snapped. "I've had enough of your noise and your mess. Take that coop down or I'm calling the cops." Now Jake scratched his head and smiled. "They're not hurting anyone, Karen, they're just chickens." His voice was soft, like he didn't want a fight, but Karen didn't care. She huffed and puffed, her face turning red. "Just chickens," she yelled. "They're loud, smelly farm animals and they don't belong here. You're breaking Rule 47B and I'm not letting it slide." Most people would have been nervous with Karen yelling like that. She looked ready to explode and that clipboard made her seem official. But Jake, he didn't even blink. He bent down to pat Goldie's head and said, "Relax, Karen, it's not a big deal." That was like throwing water on a fire, except it made Karen's fire burn hotter. "Not a big deal," she screeched. "We'll see about that." She pulled her phone out of her pocket and started dialing. Jake watched her, still calm as ever. He didn't argue or beg her to stop. He just stood there, feeding his chickens like nothing was wrong. Karen held the phone to her ear and smirked. "Yes, hello, 911, she said loudly, making sure Jake could hear. "I've got an emergency. There's a man with illegal chickens harassing the neighborhood." If you were watching this, you might think Jake was in trouble. Karen sounded so sure of herself, like she'd already won. The whole street could hear her now. Neighbors peeked out their windows, curious about the commotion. A lady with illegal chickens, that sounded serious, but Jake didn't look worried, not one bit. He tossed another handful of corn and whispered something to Clucky. What was he up to? Why wasn't he scared? Here's the secret Karen didn't know. That sunny morning wasn't just another day. It was the start of something big, something loud and wild that would flip Maple Grove upside down. Karen thought she was in charge, but she had no clue who she was messing with. Jake wasn't just the chicken guy. He was someone else entirely, and soon everyone would find out. That little red Coop, those clucking hens, they were about to turn into the biggest surprise Karen ever saw. So what do you think happens next? A lady calling the cops over chickens sounds crazy, right? Stick around, because this story's just getting started, and trust me, you won't believe what's coming. It was a sunny Saturday morning in Maple Grove, and trouble was brewing. Karen Miller, the bossy queen of the Homeowners Association, was on the move. She lived across the street from Jake Turner, the guy with the chickens. Karen didn't like those chickens one bit. She thought they were loud and messy, and she was ready to do something about it. Her flip-flops smacked the pavement as she marched over to Jake's yard. Slap, slap, slap. It sounded like war drums, loud and angry, warning everyone that Karen meant business. She stopped right at the edge of Jake's grass, her hands on her hips. "Turner," she barked, her voice sharp and mean. She pointed a finger at the little red chicken coop in Jake's backyard. "This eyesore breaks Rule 47B, no farm animals allowed. You better take it down right now or I'm calling the cops." Her eyes were narrow and her lips were pressed tight. She looked like she'd been waiting all week to say those words. Now Jake was standing by the coop, holding a handful of corn. His 3 hens, Clucky, Pebbles, and Goldie, were pecking around his feet. He didn't jump or look scared when Karen yelled. Instead, he just smiled a little and scratched Clucky's fluffy black feathers. "They're pets, Karen," he said, calm as could be. "Relax." Karen's face turned red. "Pets," she screeched, so loud that a bird flew out of a nearby tree. "Those clucking monsters woke me up at 6 a.m. I'm done with your nonsense." She couldn't believe Jake called them pets. To her, they were noisy troublemakers, not cute little friends. She stomped her foot and her flip-flop made a loud smack on the ground. "I can't sleep, I can't think, all I hear is cluck, cluck, cluck every morning. This is a nice neighborhood, not a barnyard." Jake tilted his head and kept smiling. He tossed some corn to Pebbles, who waddled over to grab it. "They're not that loud," he said. His voice was soft, like he didn't want to fight, but that just made Karen madder. She didn't want him to stay calm. She wanted him to be scared, to say sorry, to promise he'd get rid of the chickens. But Jake wasn't doing any of that. He acted like everything was fine, and that drove Karen wild. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. "Oh, you think this is a joke," she said, waving the phone in the air. "I'm not playing around anymore." She started dialing, her fingers moving fast. Jake watched her, still feeding his hens. He didn't say a word. Karen held the phone to her ear and turned up her voice so the whole street could hear. "Yes, hello 911, she shouted. "I've got an emergency. There's a man with illegal chickens harassing the neighborhood." The word emergency made it sound big, like Jake was doing something really bad. Neighbors started peeking out their windows. Mrs. Carter down the street pulled back her curtain. Little Tommy from next door stuck his head out, his eyes wide. Everyone wanted to know what was going on. Illegal chickens, harassing the neighborhood, that sounded serious. Karen stood tall, her chin up, like she was the hero saving Maple Grove from a big problem. But Jake, he didn't even flinch, not one bit. He bent down and patted Goldie's golden feathers, acting like Karen wasn't even there. The hens clucked softly, pecking at the ground, happy as ever. Karen glared at him, waiting for him to panic. She thought he'd beg her to hang up or promise to tear down the coop, but Jake didn't do any of that. He just kept smiling, like he wasn't worried at all. And that made Karen's blood boil. "Stop grinning," she snapped. "You think this is funny? The police are coming and they'll make you get rid of those stupid birds." She pointed at the coop again, her arm shaking with anger. "I've been putting up with this for weeks. The noise, the feathers, the smell, it's awful. You're breaking the rules and I'm going to win this time." Jake stood up slowly and brushed the dirt off his hands. "They're not stupid," he said quietly. "They're my friends." He looked at Clucky, who clucked back at him like she agreed. Karen huffed, her face getting redder. "Friends," she yelled. "They're chickens. You're crazy, Turner, and I'm done talking." She turned her back to him, still shouting into the phone. "Yes, officer, he's right here, breaking Rule 47B. I need help fast." If you were watching, you might think Jake was in big trouble. Karen sounded so sure of herself, like she had all the power. She had her rulebook, her clipboard, and now the police on the way. Most people would be nervous with someone yelling and calling 911. But Jake wasn't like most people. He didn't run inside or try to hide the coop. He didn't even look mad. He just kept feeding his hens, tossing corn like it was any other day. Why wasn't he scared? What was he thinking? Here's the thing, Jake wasn't worried because he knew something Karen didn't. Oh boy, did he ever. That little smile on his face wasn't just him being nice. It was a hint, a tiny clue that he had a secret. Karen thought she was the boss, stomping around in her flip-flops, making big threats. She thought Jake was just a silly guy with chickens, someone she could push around. But she was wrong, dead wrong. The air felt heavy now, like something big was about to happen. Karen's loud voice echoed down the street and the neighbors kept watching. They whispered to each other, wondering what the cops would do. Would they take the chickens away? Would Jake have to pay a fine? Everyone thought Karen was going to win. She always won when it came to the HOA rules. But Jake's calm face said something different. He wasn't acting like a guy who was about to lose. Karen finished her call and shoved the phone back in her pocket. "You're done, Turner," she said, crossing her arms. "The police will be here soon and they'll fix this. Say goodbye to your little pets." She smirked, thinking she'd finally beat him, but Jake just shrugged and tossed more corn to Goldie. "We'll see," he said, his voice quiet but strong. What did he mean by that? Why was he so chill? Karen didn't notice, but there was something in Jake's eyes, a little sparkle, like he was waiting for something. The tension was building, like a storm cloud rolling in. Karen thought she had the upper hand, but Jake wasn't playing her game. He had a trick up his sleeve, and soon everyone would find out what it was. The sunny morning wasn't so peaceful anymore. Things were about to get loud, and Karen had no idea what was coming her way. The sunny Saturday when Karen called 911 was just the start. Days went by and she didn't give up. Not even a little. Every morning, like clockwork, Karen would march across the street to Jake's house. Her flip-flops went slap, slap, slap on the pavement, loud and fast. She was on a mission to make Jake get rid of his chickens, Clucky, Pebbles, and Goldie. She didn't care that Jake loved them. To her, they were a big problem, and she wasn't going to stop until that little red Coop was gone. Karen had a plan. She'd storm over with her phone in her hand, snapping pictures of the coop from every angle. Click, click, click. She'd stand there muttering to herself about health hazards. "These chickens are dirty," she'd grumble. "They'll make us all sick." She didn't have any proof, but that didn't matter to her. She just wanted Jake to feel scared. One day, she even wrote a big note on bright red paper. It said "Violation Notice" in huge letters. She taped it right on Jake's front door where everyone could see it. The note said he was breaking Rule 47B and had to take the coop down or pay a fine. Karen smirked as she stuck it there, thinking this will show him. The neighbors started noticing all the fuss. They'd peek out their windows or talk in their yards, whispering to each other. "Poor Jake," they'd say, shaking their heads. "Karen's gonna bury him in fines." They felt bad for him. Karen was the boss of the homeowners association, and she always got her way. If your grass was too long, she'd fine you. If your dog barked too much, she'd fine you. Now it looked like Jake and his chickens were next. "He's in big trouble," said Mrs. Carter, who lived down the street. "Karen never loses." But here's the funny thing, Jake didn't seem worried at all. Not one bit. Every time Karen came over, he'd just wave at her with a big, friendly smile. "Morning, Karen," he'd call out like they were buddies. Then he'd grab a can of paint and start fixing up his coop. He added a fresh coat of red to the wood, making it look even nicer. The chickens clucked happily around him, pecking at the ground while he worked. To Jake, it was just another day. He wasn't scared of Karen's pictures or her red note. He acted like everything was fine. Karen didn't like that, not one bit. She thought Jake was making fun of her. Every time he waved or smiled, it made her madder. One morning, she lost it. She marched over, her face red and her hands on her hips. "You think this is funny?" she yelled, pointing at the coop. "Painting it won't save you. Wait till the police haul you off. They're coming, Turner, and you'll be sorry." Her voice was so loud that little Tommy next door dropped his ball and ran inside. Karen wanted Jake to stop smiling. She wanted him to panic, but he didn't. Instead, Jake looked up from his painting and shrugged. "It's just a coop, Karen," he said, calm as ever. He dipped his brush in the paint and kept going, adding a bright red stripe to the roof. Clucky waddled over and clucked at him like she was saying, "Good job." Jake chuckled and tossed her some corn. "See, they like it," he said. Karen huffed and stomped her foot. "You're impossible," she shouted. "I'm not giving up, you'll see." Then she turned around and marched back to her house, muttering under her breath. The neighbors kept watching, and the whispers got louder. Why isn't Jake scared? They wondered. Karen's got the rules on her side. She called the cops. He's gonna lose that coop for sure. But Jake didn't act like someone who was losing. He kept going outside every day, feeding his chickens and fixing things up. One day, he even built a tiny fence around the coop just to keep the hens safe. He hummed a little song while he worked, happy as could be. It didn't make sense to anyone. Why was he so calm? Didn't he know the police were coming? But there was something Karen didn't notice. Down the street, parked near a big oak tree, was a black SUV. It wasn't flashy or loud, just a plain car sitting there. Most people wouldn't even look twice at it. Karen sure didn't. She was too busy yelling at Jake and taking her pictures. But Jake saw it. Every morning, when he waved at Karen or painted his coop, he'd glance at that SUV. And when he did, his smile got a little wider. Just a tiny bit, like he was hiding something fun. That black SUV wasn't just a random car. It was there for a reason, a big reason Karen didn't know about. It stayed parked day after day, quiet and still. Sometimes the windows were cracked open and you could see shadows inside. Someone was watching Karen, watching Jake, watching the whole street, but Karen was too mad to care. She didn't see the SUV or the way Jake's eyes twinkled when he looked at it. She thought she was winning, but Jake knew something she didn't. The days kept passing and the tension grew. Karen's visits got louder and her threats got bigger. "I've got proof now," she'd shout, waving her phone full of Coop pictures. "The police will shut this down." She stuck more red notes on Jake's door, 2, then 3, then 4. The neighbors kept whispering, sure that Jake was toast. "Poor guy," they'd say. "He's nice, but he can't beat Karen." Little Tommy even asked his mom, "Are the chickens going to jail?" Everyone thought the end was near. But Jake, he kept smiling. He'd wave at Karen, paint his coop, and toss corn to his hens. He'd look at that black SUV and grin just a little. It was like he was waiting for something big. Karen thought he was being silly or stubborn, but she was missing the clues. That SUV wasn't just sitting there for fun. It was part of Jake's secret, and soon it would change everything. What was in that car? Why was Jake worried? Karen had no idea, but the answers were coming. The quiet mornings in Maple Grove were about to get loud, really loud. And Jake's little grin, it was the first hint that Karen wasn't as smart as she thought. Stick around, because things are heating up. Monday morning came and it was a big day in Maple Grove. Karen Miller had been waiting for this moment all week. She'd called 911 about Jake Turner's chickens, and now her wish was coming true. A police car rolled down the street, its red and blue lights flashing bright. It stopped right in front of Jake's house. Karen stood on her porch, her arms crossed tight. She had a huge smirk on her face, like she'd just won the lottery. "Told you, Turner," she shouted, loud enough for everyone to hear. She was sure she'd finally beat Jake and his little red chicken coop. The car doors opened and 2 police officers stepped out. They wore dark uniforms and shiny badges, looking serious. Karen leaned forward, her eyes wide with excitement. She'd been dreaming of this: Jake in trouble, his chickens gone, her rules winning. Neighbors peeked out their windows, holding their breath. Little Tommy ran to his front yard, yelling, "The cops are here." Everyone thought Karen's big moment had arrived. Jake was in his backyard, same as always. He was tossing corn to Goldie, his pretty golden hen. Clucky and Pebbles clucked around him, happy as ever. He didn't hear the police car at first, he was too busy with his chicken, but then he looked up and saw the officers walking toward him. Karen rubbed her hands together, waiting for the best part. She wanted to see handcuffs snap on Jake's wrist. She wanted him to look scared and say sorry. "This is it," she whispered to herself, grinning. But then something weird happened. Really weird. The cops didn't knock on Jake's front door or yell at him to come out. Nope, they walked right into the backyard, straight to where Jake was standing. Karen blinked, confused. "What's going on?" she muttered. The neighbors leaned closer to their windows, trying to figure it out. The officers stopped next to Jake, and one of them, tall with a friendly face, clapped Jake on the shoulder. "Hey, Sarge," he said, smiling big. "Chief said to check in. You good?" And Karen's jaw dropped. It hit the floor so fast you could almost hear it. "Sarge, Chief, what were they talking about?" She stood there, frozen, her arms still crossed. Her smirk was gone, replaced with a big round O on her face. The neighbors gasped. Mrs. Carter dropped her coffee mug and it splashed all over her porch. Little Tommy shouted, "Jake's a cop." The whole street buzzed with shock. Jake turned to the officer and nodded. "Yeah, I'm good," he said, tossing more corn to Goldie. He was still calm, still smiling, like nothing big was happening. But it was big, huge. The officer laughed and said, "Those chickens look happy, Sarge. Chief'll love hearing about this." The other cop nodded and patted Jake on the back. They weren't mad. They weren't here to arrest him. They were his friends. Karen's brain couldn't keep up. She shook her head like she was trying to wake up from a dream. "Sarge, what's a Sarge?" she mumbled. Then it hit her. Sarge meant sergeant. Jake wasn't just the chicken guy she'd been yelling at. He was Sergeant Jake Turner, a real police officer. Not only that, but he was a decorated cop. That meant he'd done brave things and gotten awards. He'd been on leave, taking a break after solving a major case. Karen had no idea. None. Jake finally looked over at Karen, his smile growing a little wider. "Oh, did I mention?" he said, his voice nice and easy. "The cops are already here, me." He pointed at himself, then went back to feeding his hens. The officers chuckled like it was the funniest thing ever. Karen's face turned bright red, redder than her violation notice notes. She didn't know what to say. She just stood there, her mouth open, looking silly. But wait, there was more. Remember that black SUV parked down the street? The one Karen never noticed. It wasn't just a random car. Those were Jake's undercover pals. Undercover meant they were secret cops, watching everything without anyone knowing. They'd been sitting there for days, keeping an eye on the neighborhood. They saw Karen yelling, taking pictures, and tapping notes on Jake's door. They saw it all and they were on Jake's side. Karen thought she was the boss, but Jake had friends in high places. "A sneaky, right?" The neighbors couldn't believe it. "Jake's a cop," Mrs. Carter said, picking up her broken mug. "I thought he was just a nice guy with chickens." Little Tommy ran in circles, shouting, "Jake, a hero, Jake's a hero." Word spread fast. People came out of their houses, staring at Jake like he was a movie star. Karen's big win turned into a big flop, and everyone could see it. Jake didn't brag or show off. He didn't need to. He just kept tossing corn, letting Clucky peck at his shoes. The officers stayed for a minute, chatting with him. "Heard you took down that robbery gang last month," one said. "Nice work, Sarge," Jake shrugged. "Just doing my job," he replied. But to Karen it was like a punch in the stomach. Robbery gang, last month? She'd been yelling at a hero this whole time.